Welcome everybody to the design track. We're at the presentation that's called The User Experience Designer is a Product Manager's Best Friend. So let's see, Erin, could you skip on the next slide? So just a quick housekeeping item. So we have a few more upcoming talks that we would love to see you at. At 4 p.m. today, we have an awesome mixer with the startup track. And the topic of the mixer is an innovation in the time of adversity. So join us for awesome MCs, DJs, value-loaded topics, awesome speakers. Grab some virtual drinks with your fellow design and startup community colleagues. And then tomorrow we have a keynote on approaches to elevating design company-wide. And on Friday, we have a panel discussion with some fantastic speakers. We'll be discussing the future of the design, so don't miss that. So that's going to be at 3 p.m. and tomorrow's talk at 1 p.m. So, alrighty, so today I'd like to welcome our speakers, the dynamic duo, Adam Rasheed, former CTO and SVP of Product at Sentient Science, and Aaron Smith, President and founder of Giraffe Design. Aaron and Adam both had the opportunity to work together at Buffalo-based startup Sentient Science. Aaron worked for the organization for 6.5 years, where he helped to take the company through multiple rounds of funding and grew the engineering and design teams. And Adam joined the organization after the Series B round of funding to lead product management. They work on the Sentient Science product suite for 2 years together. So, and with that, I'd love to pass mic to Adam.
Thank you very much, Lena. Appreciate the introductions. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our chat here today. Hopefully you'll find some of the content interesting and have some questions afterwards. You can ask questions, I think, throughout, or you can certainly ask them at the end. Just to provide a little bit of context, Aaron and I work together at Sentient Science, which, as Lena indicated, is a Buffalo-based startup, focused primarily on prognostics of industrial equipment. So really helping large equipment operators try to predict when their equipment will fail so that they can optimize maintenance plans as well as optimize or minimize operating expenses. The focus really, or the specialty, was on rotating drivetrains, so gearboxes, so the bearings and gears. And they really looked at 3 different industries. The major one was the wind turbine industry, so looking at gearboxes for wind turbines. But you could also imagine there's also very heavy gearboxes, or not heavy, but a lot of drivetrain components in helicopters in the aerospace industry. And then there's also, they had some use cases in the rail industry as well. For the purpose of this talk, Aaron, do you want to go to the next slide? We're going to cover a range of topics. Aaron and I are going to bounce back and forth a little bit. I'll be covering the product side, talking a little bit about how I view product innovation and a successful product, and how does product management enable that, and then looking at sort of the product life cycle. And Aaron's going to sort of provide the overlay on that, providing the UX perspective, and we'll both talk about jointly how we work together where there was a strong overlap, where the successful product really needed both product and UX to make the product or the process successful. Next slide, Aaron, please. All right, so let's kind of jump right into it. If I look at a successful product, I often describe it as this triangle where the 3 vertices are 3 key components for a successful product. The first one is actually having the product feature or the invention or whatever it is that you're selling that has to exist. That's the top. Then the bottom right is whatever that is, that the item or the process or the good that you're selling or the service that you're selling has to have value to a user. They have to value it in some manner. And then the left vertice on the bottom is an indication that the provider of the service or the good also has to generate value, so the business entity. So if you look at it, in order for a product to be successful over the long term, you need all 3. You can't just have 2 of them. A good example would be, let's say that there's a really good feature or a product that I can sell, and there's users who really want it, but it can't be made in a manner such that the manufacturer can actually make it with a reasonable profit. that the price point is too low compared to the cost. Well, at that point, the product won't succeed, right? Even though people want to use it and it's a useful thing, it can't be made cheaply enough, and there's no viable business model for a company to actually make money off of that. Similarly, you can see a different situation where there's a product or a feature, and I can make it cheaply. I can provide that service relatively at a low cost, but nobody wants it, right? There's the bottom right-hand side, there's not enough of a user base to actually justify making it. So you really need all three corners of the vertice, all three corners of the triangle. Now, if you look at the sides of the triangle, those are showing the relationships between them. And you'll see that on the top two, you'll definitely see UX being involved there. Converting a product or a feature into something that's actually usable by a regular human being, there's a lot of UX design work that goes into that, and that's coming up with a usable product. And then on the left side, getting the customer feedback so that you can iterate and make better products over time. There's a lot of UX feedback tools and processes where you gather the data and then improve the design of the product over time. The business model usually is the one area that is probably more focused or done by the product managers working with finance teams, etc. Usually there isn't too much UX input into that. But 2 out of the 3 sides of the triangle, there's strong UX involvement. With that, I want to hand it over to Aaron, and sort of he'll give his triangle view from the UX perspective.
Thanks, Adam. So yeah, reason for this talk too is you're going to see a lot of overlap between what we're saying here, and we're just saying it in kind of different terms, right? One from a product side, one from a design side. While at Sentient Science, my goal there was to really bring in human-centered design right into the process. We are in a very engineer-heavy organization, but really come down to utilizing the 3 quadrants here of the Venn diagram to really make an innovative product, right? You need all 3 of these sectors to get that spot in the middle of true innovation, right? First being desirability. That is owned by the design team, right? They are there to find out what is desirable, what do people want to use, and how do they feel when they're using it, right? You want a product that invokes joy, or at least at the very least doesn't cause problems, right, for your end users. Viability from a business perspective, does it make sense? And this is the sector that product owns, right? And then even though we're not talking about this, it's just as important as well as the feasibility. And this is what development owns as well. Can we do it? For example, I mean, design will come up with some elaborate design, but if development isn't there on day one to tell you, like, to give you their opinion of, what it would take to build that, you could build something that just takes too much time. You can design something that just takes too much time. Doesn't let you get feedback as quick as possible. So really what it is we're identifying the three pieces of an organization that need to be represented on day one to really make that product successful, right? And again, I want to reiterate, this conversation is really focused on the relationship between product and design. Development is still essential here, right? But we want to focus on just how from a product standpoint and design standpoint, we interact with each other, right? Going back to design, it comes back down to the desirability. So design is really leading the charge to understand the end user, and also the customer, right? Because those aren't necessarily the same people. And we're doing exercises and creating deliverables to give the rest of the team more context, right? And this is what's happening through user research and interviews and testing. We'll get through some of those exercises and deliverables a little bit later in this conversation. But then on the viability side, we're getting into, again, the product is owning, what is the business initiative? What are we going to do? How are we going to go to market? How are we going to price it at? And can we build a business around this product idea, right? And really, it's at the center point where we're coming to the point of finding business problems and aligning them with user problems, right? And that is where we're stepping into this innovation spot. Can we make something that is useful and makes money for the business and alleviates pain there, but then can we also alleviate pain for our end users or potential end users, right? Adam, before we go on to the next slide, do you have anything to add to this one?
No, I think you covered everything very well, Aaron.
Great. Well, now it's your turn anyways.
Okay, yes. So I'll talk a little bit about what is product management, some of the roles, and then Aaron will do the same on the UX side. This is a definition I pulled off of the website down below, it's just referenced there. I like this definition a lot. And there's some key things to take out of this definition. The first is to recognize that product management really owns the entire life cycle of the product, all the way from starting with the customer and identifying what is the customer's needs, what do they want, what are they trying to solve, what's their problem, their business problem, and then working all the way through to figuring out what are possible solutions that we can come up with to solve that business problem and drive that business outcome. And then also working with the different elements of different teams to understand, okay, can we build a viable business around this, solving this problem and offering the solution to market? If so, then working with the development teams to actually build it and then market it and sell it, and then ultimately trying to always go through this process of continual improvement of so this product stays live and relevant for our customers as the market evolves, over years and years. The other part, so the number one thing is to recognize it's really owning the entire life cycle of a product, and it's an iterative process. It never ends. The second part to recognize of this definition is if you look at every single item there, you see how multidisciplinary it is. It really, really is touching many, many very, very diverse skill sets and individuals and organizations across the company. Some of them are deeply, I'll say, technical and engineering type skill sets, software development or architecture. A lot of, there's many that are finance focused around business modeling. There's marketing as well, and sales, and of course the UX side as well. You see the multidisciplinary nature of product management makes it actually a very challenging role to fill, to find somebody who can, you'll never find a person who's good at doing all of these things, but can they be really good at one of them and good enough at the others? And that actually goes to I think would be a perfect segue to the next slide, which is kind of what does a product manager do? And in this case, I want to actually call out a definition that I do not like. I often hear that a product manager is the CEO of the product. And I don't like that definition at all. I would say that the product manager is the facilitator of the product. And the reason why is if you look at a CEO of a company, basically they have direct line authority over everybody in the company. And they can direct individuals to, do something, take an action. And even if that individual foundationally disagrees with the decision, ultimately it is the CEO's responsibility and authority to make the decision. And everyone really needs to fall in line. A product manager almost never, it's very, in fact, I've never seen it, but it's very, very rare for a product manager to have direct line authority over all of the multidisciplinary functions that are needed to make the product successful. Product managers don't own the finance team. They don't have direct reports from marketing, from engineering, etc. So they have to do all of their product management is done through influence. You can't simply direct someone and say, do this. You actually have to convince all the other functions. You have to build a consensus around the vision of the product and convince them that this is worthwhile for their time and their effort to do it because this is the right thing to do for the company. Now, if the company is a very small company with one product, that generally is easier because you only have one product. So you just have to get consensus around the product. But if you're working in a large company where there's many, many different products that are being offered, you're now competing for a finite pool of resources for your product that you're trying to manage versus another product manager who's also trying to develop their product as well. So there'll be some conflict in terms of prioritization for the different products, and you have to manage that. And it is all done via influence skill sets because you will never be able to direct someone to do it. So that really drives the key skills that I've outlined. Number one is the ability to communicate. To communicate well, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build, why it's important, and the ability to really create consensus and win-win situations, right, for everybody. And once again, because it's so multidisciplinary, this product manager has to do this with different organizations that might actually have competing goals or competing targets for the year. The sales team might be incentivized to sell something, whereas the engineering team is literally incentivized to go build something different, a different product at that moment in time. And yet you as a product manager have to bring these diverse groups together and get them aligned in order to get this product to be successful. And of course, being able to do that level of complex, multidimensional, multidisciplinary consensus building really requires high emotional intelligence, understanding people's drivers, motivations, what are they trying to accomplish, how do you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish for the product that also helps that individual or that function accomplish what their goals are for the year. That's very, very important. And you really, really need to be a clear thinker. And of course, all of this, if you're trying to lead through influence, really comes down to trust. Yeah, if you do your job well, people will foundationally trust you, so that when you come and say, hey, look, I really need your group to do this for me, even if they're unsure of the direction or might disagree with you, they'll say, look, okay, I actually trust you. It's not the decision I would make, but I trust you. You have bigger context here. Okay, we'll do it. Very, very, very important. And I often joke, my last bullet's really just a joke. You have very little authority, but you do have a lot of responsibility, because ultimately if the product fails, it does come to the product manager and the product management team for why is this product not succeeding. And the product manager can't just sit there and point the finger and say, well, engineering didn't do what I asked them to do. That's irrelevant. You're the product manager. You're supposed to find a way. So I always joke and say, well, product managers often have very few friends. It didn't turn out that case in my case. I was lucky. I had a lot of friends, but it's you'll find that product managers are often in the product management team can often feel a little bit isolated because it's they're trying to pull together so many different threads of people in different functions to work together. Next slide, I think. Yeah, this one's a little bit of an eye chart. I'm not going to go over it in detail. What I really want to just show is that there's sort of three major roles or levels of product management. There's actually more roles that are not on here. So I'll just go over those really quickly. And then I think the more important thing is to show this chart. I actually put this chart together when I was at Sentient. What's really important is to clearly define who owns what. So this is a RACI chart, a responsibility accountability chart, just showing that we had divided the different roles in product management in sort of three different layers or roles. And S means that it's a supporting role, L means it's a leading role, and this helped just clearly define roles and responsibilities of different individuals. You could make a similar chart, not just within the product management team, but across the entire org to also clearly delineate and say, okay, where does finance come in? Where does marketing come in? And that helps, once again, drive consensus and understanding across the broader company team about who owns what decisions for the different tasks that need to be done in product management. If you look at the way we had divided ourselves, you have somebody who is sort of head of product for the company, and they're really driving the overall product vision across the entire product portfolio. There might be multiple products. They're trying to also look ahead many years, and they're working with the CEO, they're working with the CTO, they're working with the strategy team, trying to understand what makes sense for the product to build, not just this year, but in 3 years, 4 years. Where do we need to head? What kind of investments do we need to make now to get to that end point where we want to be in 3 years from now? The product manager, usually a head of product will have multiple product managers reporting to them, one for each product, and that product manager, they own things like the detailed go-to-market approach, product positioning within their market segment. They'll also usually own pricing as well for the product. And more importantly, they'll own the definition of the product as well as the detailed roadmaps, the timeline on which different product features and major releases will be released to the market. And they have to have a really good understanding of the market and where their product will fit in serving customer needs and as well as the competition. And then the product owner is probably the most tactical, if you will. You might have multiple product owners reporting to a product manager, and they'll be responsible for delivering the specific product features. Usually they're quite technical. They're able to have the detailed technical conversation with the development teams, and they can understand the different trade-offs that need to be made, for example, on the tech stack that's being built. They have to make short-term versus long-term decisions. Does it make sense to incur a little bit of technical debt to get a product feature out the door early, knowing that we're going to have to redo some of that later on, and that's a discussion that has to happen with the development team. And then, of course, they own the quality of the product, and they also work with the sprint team, running the biweekly sprints usually. So those are the main roles. Another role that I haven't put on here is sometimes called a technical product manager. They might be owning, like, instead of a product, they might be owning a technical feature that spans multiple products. And once again, they tend to be very technically oriented. I think that's kind of it. I want to talk about this slide. Aaron, yeah, you want to cover what you'd see from the UX side?
Yeah, so what is user experience design? So really touching, where I was before in the process, really user experience design starts with understanding your end user, right? It starts with understanding what their needs and their problems are. And then it gets into finding innovative solutions to help solve that problem and take them into account, make them at the forefront of that, right? Of that solution, and utilizing your relationship that you've established with your users, current users and potential users to get that feedback, right? So I've always seen it as I'm as the user experience designer, not in charge of making it look pretty, but I'm in charge of bringing the information to the table to the rest of the team of what our users like and what they don't like, right? What will they use and what they won't use? What are the problems, right? So yeah, I mean, going into that, it really comes down to facilitating those conversations, right? Facilitating the user interviews, the setting up the analytics and making sure those are put in place so that we have a regular data stream, putting together, whether it's wireframes, user flows, getting into high fidelities and testing those, right? It's putting all the pieces together and doing it in a rapid manner that we can get feedback quickly, right? So as a group, we've come together, product development and design have come together, they've thought up of a solution, and now design will go and test that, right? We'll go and figure out, is this the best way forward, until we spend expensive development time to get there. And we're in a constant testing of assumptions is the best way to say it. And there are many different roles within that. And I guess let's jump into that segue. There are many other titles out there for the user experience roles. However, I want to stay with some of the kind of industry staples here. And really what it gets at is, your user experience designer, he's a generalist. He's somebody that, will start with the research, go into the, wireframing, solution building, high fidelity, go into usability testing, and then even follow up with the analytics and the user feedback, right? Understand where it is coming from the product, and then repeat. As a generalist, these people probably also are in smaller organizations, and they might also get pulled into other user experience-based initiatives, whether it's another product or even into marketing initiatives as well. Looking to improve that experience, the touch point of every customer or user to the company, right? Product designer, a little bit more focused, same as a generalist, the UX designer. However, they're really just focused on a specific product, right? They're really there influencing the roadmap and really holding the hand of that product from start to beginning. But then as the organization gets bigger, people are allowed to now more focus, right? So we have the visual designer or the user interface designer. They're pushing pixels, right? They're making the high fidelity mock-ups. They're building prototypes of the assumed solution so it can be tested. And they're doing different versions of that, so there can be different tests done. And they're working off of information that is collected by the user experience researcher who's going out there and doing the user interviews, building the user personas, creating user journeys, creating all this valuable data and information to move forward with, right? And basically be the cornerstone of the decisions going after that. Making sure that with that information, we now we now have a holistic view of our users and the problems that they see. So now everyone, not just the design team, has that information to make decisions going forward. Who are the customers and who are the end users? Adam?
Yeah, I'll pick it up from here. And then I think this is a really important question to ask. And we just wanted to bring it out here because I think Aaron and I had actually strong agreement on this, but it's just something both important to understand from both the UX and product perspective. If you take a look at most cases, in many cases, people would think of the customer and end user as interchangeable, and a lot of times it is. And I'll give an example, especially in consumer-related products. I'll give an example of streaming products like Netflix or Disney Plus, or take your pick. You know, when I join up, I give my credit card. So I'm the customer. The customer is the person who actually pays for the item, and the end user is the person who's actually using the item. And those are not necessarily always the same person. So as say a Netflix user, I pay for it, and then you know, I'm the one who consumes it. I'm the one who logs in and watches movies, etc. However, if I'm doing that on behalf of my family, I might have different end users. So for example, I have 2 kids, younger children, and they're users as well. They're certainly not the customer. They're not the ones who pay for it by any stretch of the imagination. They didn't even have a say in the decision whether to get a Netflix subscription or not. That was entirely done by me as a parent. But as an end user, they certainly do have a login, and they can log in as a child. And the experience that they experience is necessarily different than the experience that I would have as a parent. And it's very, very important to understand the distinction between the two. The UX individual really is focusing on making sure that the end user experience is appropriate. And I can actually give a pretty big contrast right now. I just noticed, I just got access to Disney Plus, and I noticed there's a very different approach there. Whereas in Netflix, it's basically the same user interface. The content is different a little bit, you know, for when my child logs in versus I'm logging in. With Disney Plus, the actual interface is quite a bit different. It actually looks different. It's really tuned more towards a kid versus to an adult. And clearly they've spent a little bit more time in understanding that there's a different user base. And that's something you'd expect from Disney, which caters a lot to children, of course. I want to contrast that a little bit, that consumer market from the enterprise market, which really is where Aaron and I were playing in, where we're selling these prognostic solutions to large enterprises that are operating fleets of heavy assets, you know, wind turbines or helicopters. In that case, the customer is often an executive, a senior vice president, a CEO, basically writing the check for the millions of dollars of contract that they're about to sign. Whereas the user, they might never log into the product. The user, in fact, might be several levels below them in the organization, an individual who is tasked with actually operating the equipment or maintaining the equipment or making decisions on financial decisions around what to buy and what not to purchase. And the feedback loop between the two might be very disjoint. The CEO might be having a certain impression of how the product is behaving, good or bad. And then the end user might have a totally different experience and view of the product. And that message might get lost in a large organization between, you know, just vertically from the end user communicating up to the CEO. So it becomes very, very, very important to understand from a product perspective, I need to satisfy both the customer, the individual who's paying for the product, as well as the end users. I need to make sure that their experience is a good experience, and it's a product that they actually want to use. And UX very, very much helps, is foundational in the latter, but they're also important in the beginning as well in identifying the customers. Aaron, this is I know the topic that's close to both of our hearts. Is there anything you want to add to that, what I just said?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go.
No, I think from the most part, especially from my experience at the enterprise software point, there's a lot of give and pull or give and take in regards to that negotiation of priorities based off of customers and end users, right? And this is why, from a user experience standpoint, having data to back up your hypothesis or what you think is right is valuable, right? So that's why you get that end user feedback, because when you bring that to the higher executive conversation, and I'm talking internal at Sentient Science, you have more validity to get your initiatives through. With not, it just stays at this, you know, high level where we're really never meeting the needs of the actual end users. We're just meeting the whims of the executive conversations, right? So that's where I guess getting lesson learned in this environment is having that research and that data to support is very valuable in regards to kind of pushing initiatives forward and keeping people focused. And by having that data, that then keeps you user-centered as well, right? As opposed to, you know, the perception of the designers over in the corner just making things look pretty, right? You're coming to the table with actual useful and actionable information that you can get out of this executive conversation of high-level reports to actual usable software that people 3 levels below them are actually using to do the work for everyone, right? So yeah, very important.
And that's actually a perfect segue to this slide because it goes to one of the very first items in this list. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the product lifecycle, and you know, this is kind of my view of it. It's not complete. There's lots of steps missing in designing and developing a product. It's probably not even the right order. You know, everyone does it a little bit differently, but I think I've captured the major steps in the product lifecycle. And then what Aaron and I did is we kind of sat through and we overlaid where UX was had a direct deliverable into that process or heavily influenced that process. And the key takeaway, just by looking at this, you can see that UX is everywhere, right? It's not, you know, there's this perhaps a misconception that, oh, the UX guys come in just at the product design, which is, you know, midway through the process. And that if you're bringing in UX at the product design phase, that's way too late in the whole product development cycle. They really need to be brought in at the very, very, very beginning in trying to identify the customer needs. And then the UX is actually critical at the tail end of the cycle in order to get the product feedback to go all the way back, and this loops back to, you know, the iterative nature of the product lifecycle. So that's the main takeaway I wanted to provide from this. I'll go through it in more detail, but just to show UX really is everywhere in every step. So if you look at the product, you start off with obviously the company mission. You know, the company has a certain set of goals and technologies that they're trying to achieve for their customer base, and you start talking to your customers and you try to understand what are the customer needs, you know, consistent with the mission and the solutions that you think you can provide. A huge fraction of this is where UX research comes in. And a very obvious point is persona development, right? We just talked about the difference between an end user and a customer. Well, those are different personas. You know, the individuals at the executive levels, they have certain needs and wants from this product. And we have to satisfy those and understand their persona and their needs and wants. And the actual end user might be someone different. And they also have certain needs and wants as well. And we need to clearly define those different personas. And that goes to the type of data that Aaron was saying that we would want to gather, an example of the data we would want to gather and produce as a deliverable. So we can have, as an internal development team and a product team, we can actually have a data-driven discussion about which customer personas are we targeting, and the ones we're not targeting, we still need to satisfy those needs. How are we going to satisfy those needs, and how are we going to address them? So it helps bring a much more fruitful conversation rather than us just trying to guess or make assumptions about what we think our customer is going to, how they're going to behave and what they want. The next step really is you take those customer needs. Part of it is personas, but there's a whole bunch of other development needs that are documented, and there's different techniques and tools. After this slide, Aaron will take you through some examples of some of the artifacts that the UX team produces that we use throughout this process. We start looking at what a product vision might look like. What's the vision of the solution? Here, UX, you know, heavily influences it through all the deliverables that they provided from understanding the customer needs. And this is where product actually has to work very, very closely with the different divisions across the company, with the sales team, the marketing team, the development teams, to truly understand what could we possibly sell at what price points, and could we even develop it, you know, talking to the development teams. How long would it take to develop? Do we have the right skill sets? So this is a multidisciplinary conversation around trying to understand what is the product that we think we could offer to the market, and understanding at an early phase without committing any code, do we think that this product would generate a viable business? And that goes to the business case. The next slide, the next step in the process is coming up with that business case. And I didn't really explicitly call this out, but between product solution vision and business case, you're probably doing some level of user testing. You're probably maybe testing out your ideas, either through conversations, getting the sales team and the marketing team and having customer conversations to test out to see if this product vision resonates with the market at the price point that you think that you're thinking or that you're assuming in your business case, so that you can get an understanding of, yeah, we think that this will generate a viable business. And if you clear those hurdles, then you can start getting into more specific product definition. What kind of features do you think would be in the product? What are the different product modules? How are we going to divide our product suite? Is it just one monolithic product, or will it be 4 or 5 different modules and customers can opt in for 1 or 2 of those modules? These are all important discussions and conversations to have, and UX has a very strong part in that conversation. And then, of course, you have to design and develop the go-to-market strategy. Once again, lots of conversations with the marketing. How are you going to do your sales? How are you going to engage the customers? Are you going to do it through conferences? Are you going to do direct marketing, direct sales? What is the product going to look like, and what market segments is it going to be actually starting with? And then you're going to, sort of land and grow from there. A lot of conversations, discussions around that strategy to get into the market. And once you understand that, then you can start getting into the detailed product design. So this is now where UX and the engineering teams are very, very, very much involved in defining what exactly this product will do. You're starting to make design decisions about what tech stacks we're going to use, things like that, as well as the layouts and the interaction design. How is this software product going to work? Then you go over to product development. Of course, all the engineering teams now are fully spooled up. The product is being actually created. At this point, the marketing teams are probably also creating their collateral, getting advanced launch notices, generating buzz and excitement out in the industry that this product is coming. Schedules become really, really important. Very, very tough trade-off decisions need to be made because no schedule is perfect. So you're going to have to, as you go through your development cycle, you're going to realize that, oh, this feature is going to take a lot longer than we thought. You have to make trade-off decisions. Do we delay the launch, or do we de-feature a feature and prioritize it differently and get it done get this feature rolled out in a future update? Product adoption, of course, once your product's out there, UX gets heavily involved in trying to understand how do we market it, providing collateral to the marketing team. And also, it's kind of spread throughout product development, product adoption, and product feedback. But for a software product in particular, you want to put into hooks into the software itself so that you can easily gather data in an automated manner about what product features are being used, where our customers experience frustration in using your product, and that gets you back to product feedback. To the extent you want to have to the extent possible, you want to have quantitative metrics that are being automatically generated from the product itself, giving you data that tells you this feature just simply isn't working the way we thought it would. It's not resonating with the customers. And of course, other ways to get product feedback are by doing interviews and other workout sessions and things like that. You'll get product feedback that way, which will be qualitative feedback, or you can gather that data. But you also want to have automated data streams. Then you take all that data, and then you go through a continuous improvement life cycle for this product until one day the product just no longer resonates and it's time to do a complete refresh of it. And that will happen at some point for sure. So that kind of walks us through the entire product lifecycle, and where we saw UX contributing, and basically they contribute in everything, in every single stage. Aaron, do you want to add to this?
I think I'll just jump into the next slides because I'm going to add to it there.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
So yeah, and I will provide context to all these slides in regards to initiatives that me and Adam worked on together, and how the value that came out of those initiatives, right? So towards the end of my tenure there, really started a big initiative on just looking into the onboarding process. We were in the process of onboarding. It was a great opportunity. We were onboarding a new client. And so I took that chance to then really dive into some user research, right? And what does that mean? We had a big barrier in regards to just getting the data we needed in a timely fashion, and then being able to process it so that we can get accurate predictions quickly, right? So quickly started with not just internal, external discussions, but internal discussions, right? This was very siloed at this time. It was handled with some of the some software engineers, but then a lot of the data analytics team were handling this process, right? So it was really first building out personas for these people, understanding what they were going through, what their conversations look like with our client, right? And then understanding the pitfalls they were having or the trouble points they were having. And then flip that over, going to our customer. At that point, we were only communicating with one person, our point of contact, right? So, you know, being in this role, I got to actually meet other people because she put me in touch with other people that were helping her get the data. So from these conversations or these interviews, you first start by building personas and user journeys, right? Like you start letting the company know who these people are, and then the problems they're facing, and it's all written down. And then the eye-opener piece here was not necessarily the internal woes, it just solidified those. It was this revelation of the other people that were involved in this data collection that we were requiring, and like the obstacles they dealt internally with getting. We asked for data that was disparate all over different systems, required different people to access them. Some of it was old, some of it was new. Like, so there was a big, a lot more internal obstacles than we actually assumed, right? So bringing that to the surface then helped us like re-look at how we were doing our onboarding process, or give us enough context to actually relook at it and maybe prioritize it as a product initiative going forward. Yeah, really, I mean, to review these, really, it's just, I like to just keep them simple, and like for a user persona, like just help me understand what the needs and goals are of that person and the major obstacles they're having. And then people that aren't familiar with journey maps, it's really just, it's almost storyboarding out their day-to-day or their interaction with your software, and then where are the bad points and where are the good points, right? And so that everyone understands those. And there's more officialness when you write it down and you have it visual that people can see, right? Now it's a document. Doesn't mean it's true, right? Like, you learn more as you go on, as you release more, the journey map will change. It's an organic document. Both of these are organic documents that go with that persona and go with your piece of software, right? And then starting to get into more of the meat and potatoes of the design phase, you really start getting into, quickly first identifying user flows and wireframes. These are very like polished and official looking on the screen, but realistically, this is sitting down with a brainstorming session optimally, right? Optimally with the development people that will be working on the project, product person responsible for, and the design or designers responsible for, and sitting down with a whiteboard and coming up with some possible ideas in regards to, now we know some things about our users, we know the problems, we know our internal problems and obstacles. What innovative solution can we make to really help this, right? And really what this is getting into is that identification of, there are multiple users internally at our client that could potentially help us get the data, right? So how do we open up the software to give them access, but give them access that they need, right? They don't need all of it. They just need a small piece of it. And how do we give them a tool that just helps that, right? And it minimizes the amount of hands touching the data before it actually gets to us, right? So as the design process, we're still in the design process right now in that flow map, product lifecycle. We take the wireframes, we build them out into high fidelities. We make something that looks similar to or close to what the final product will be, and we have the users test it, It's a usability test. Usually what it is it could be facilitated through Zoom, or you can have them, you can have them come into the office and watch them. You just need to watch what they're doing as you give them a task, right? So you give them a task, and also too, to emphasize, the prototype isn't perfect, right? It should just be tailored to focusing on your assumptions of what you think is valuable, right? You'll learn more through the testing on where people click and think that there's something. But what you're doing is really seeing if that, and that is valuable too, to emphasize that. But you're really first seeing, does this actually work? Does this solution or assumption that we've come up with and brainstormed, does it work? And through that process of wireframing and building out clickable prototypes, within a week, we can come back and say, this is a great idea, let's get it into development, right? Or we can say, we're missing something, let's take a step back and rethink it, right? And instead of wasting valuable development time, we're iterating through design, which is a faster process, right? The other piece of the test as well is not, I like to do the usability test where you're watching and observing, but then there's also the usability scale that I like to send out after those tests. So really it's, you have somebody go through the task, and then you give them a 10-question survey, which they fill out, and it will give you a usability score through a calculation, right? And this just helps iterate if it's an enjoyable experience or not, right? There's other ways to do this as well, but it's just another feedback loop. When you have their attention, you give it to them, so you get that extra piece of feedback. And then usually as thank you, take them out to lunch or something and just make more friends, right? Because from a user experience researcher side, the more friends you have externally at these companies, the easier it is to get the data feedback, right? Because they like talking to you, they'll help you. They're actually buying into the product that you're building, right? Because they have direct feedback on that product to make it better. So in a roundabout way, you're also kind of helping with the marketing and sales, because you got that early buy-in, right? Like they are there with you, they're holding your hand, they're helping you along the way. And then the last piece of like user feedback, which Adam pointed to, was baking in analytics. So we're tracking clicks, right? And these are results of these are actual results of a test we ran. We were running a demo for a conference, and for that we had to set up a bunch of login stuff that was very cumbersome, right? I had the hypothesis that it was very cumbersome going into it. There was a lot of push back and forth, but at the very least, we're gonna get analytics on this. We're gonna track this. We're gonna learn something, right? And what we learned is that the login process was very cumbersome, right? We had a very big drop-off rate from people actually getting into the software and seeing the value. That having a failure is not a bad thing, right? Some may see that as a failure and a loss, but to me, that's like, okay, this is what we've learned. How do we bake this into the next initiative, right? How do we not repeat this failure now that we have actionable data that tells us this, right? And we've documented it. So again, this went into like a priority or a action item of things we can do, or that we needed to address the login situation for our demo version. And we can also pull some of that into the actual software as well. So again, kind of repeating what I said at the beginning, the designer is not just, there to push pixels and make the UI look pretty. We're there to own that user data, own that user information, own, really understand the user and have data to support what you're saying. And it's that data that is very valuable that makes us the best friend of the product owner, right? Because it can be leveraged, it's leveraged, and you're now just taking action you're taking action based off of like actual data as opposed to just guessing, right? And it's okay. And to iterate, or I mean, to emphasize, it's okay to start guessing, just know that they're assumptions and find the quickest way to validate them. And don't do it by pushing out a full-fledged product, right? You can do it very early on. And that's the value design provides, is you can find that value almost immediately within a week or two, as opposed to, 2-3 month development cycle of getting a minimally viable product up and running. So, I think we have about 10 minutes left. Before, one more quick plug, because we got to. There are 3 more design track sessions this week. They've all been really great and exciting so far. I hope to see everyone at the other ones, because there's more information and more things to learn. It'll be fun. But with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Yep, please submit your questions to the chat if you have any. But while we're waiting for the audience to submit the questions, so one question that I have for you, Aaron, you mentioned the importance of the analytics during one of your slides. So could you tell us a little bit more what data is important to track, and if you have suggestions, the proper way to set up the analytics system in place?
I think first it depends on the analytical tool you're using. Me personally, I'm at a point in my career that I think starting with Google Analytics or some version of that. We used Amazon Pinpoint because we were all AWS suite, very comparable to. But really what it does is it just allows you to just start tracking clicks, right? To me, like, that's the first step. Let's just track clicks so that we can map a user flow through the interface. If we could get a little bit more sophisticated and tie that user flow to an actual user that's logged in, even better. If we can tie that user to an actual user persona, even better, right? I know a lot of people do the heat map stuff. I'm mixed on the value there, and I know some people on the phone will argue that, and that's fine. But I think from just a beginning standpoint of quantitative data, like if you can just start tracking the flow of users through your software and seeing where the barriers are, you can start asking your questions at that point, right? Like, again, with the example before, we saw a huge drop-off rate. And then so as a result, I saw the drop-off rate from new session to somebody actually logging in. So I then followed the process of, the login process, what else was required. And you could just see the natural, progression of just failure, I guess is the best way to say it. So yeah, I guess long answer short, just start by tracking clicks. That's to me is the best start of your data. After that, after you do that, you can start generating questions, which then you can start looking at other analytical tools to give you more insights.
Awesome. Adam, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just maybe on the tail end, I'll pick up where Aaron just left off, is one thing that becomes very interesting is once you have the general ability to track clicks, the idea of having a hypothesis around your product, I think becomes powerful. And I think that's where Aaron left off, right? These additional questions. We put this product feature in there and we have this hypothesis that it'll be used in this manner, or we'll have this adoption rate, or we'll somehow make our customers' lives easier, more productive. And then generating sort of what kind of click analytics or what kind of analytics could I put into the automated product to actually measure that, come back with data in a few weeks to say, yep, our hypothesis is correct or incorrect. And then you can now look at that product feature with a new lens and try to improve it. Or maybe now that you have the quantitative automated data, it's now a matter of maybe doing a deep dive with a few customers with some interviews and trying to understand, okay, we saw in general this wasn't working. Where did you struggle? What happened? And then you can, once again, the whole goal is to constantly iterate around your product, to really, really make your customer's life better. Start with the customer, and you're trying to help them solve their business problem.
Yeah, just to pivot off that, I prefer the qualitative data. Like, I feel that there's more value there. I see the quantitative data as the information that lets me ask questions, right? It gives me a reason to go have that user interview, or have that conversation, or, you know, is this worthwhile exploring? I don't think your answers are all there, and anyone that thinks that, okay. I just think it gives you that path of to ask those questions, right? So that, to me, is the great value. But you can't overlook then reaching out to your users to validate that, or because you're making assumptions off the data. You don't know exactly why that's the case. Because some of the problems could have been a technical issue, and it wasn't even a user issue to begin with, right? You just don't know.
Exactly. And one quick question. So we talked a lot about helping users to overcome the challenges and avoid different pain points. Are there any frustrations that you guys have with the product design and design processes in general?
No, I think we always sung Kumbaya together, right? It's rainbow, sunshines, and unicorns, something like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Aaron?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, we're joking, but once Adam came on board, it was a little bit more kumbaya, right? And the reason I'm saying that is we actually had somebody that could own the product, right, by themselves. We had other product owners, but they also were in charge. One was in charge of marketing, one was in charge of delivery. So as a result, the product initiatives would skew to those sectors, right? You're not actually getting a holistic view of the product that is just focused on making the product better for the end user, right? So, me and Adam would have our debates of like, what is the next priority, or I would come up with ideas, and he'd be like, "You're crazy," and I'd be like, "Well, I'll go get some data to prove it," right? And he'd be like, "Fine, go prove it. That's fine." But I think ultimately, though, having somebody in the organization to focus on product in the way it needs to be is a huge value, because it just provides a level of clarity that you can actually go do your work, right? And you can do it efficiently. Like when for example, having a user sitting down and doing user research and interviews, actually know what questions to ask and who to talk to, because we know what the next initiative is. We know what the roadmap looks like. And that in itself is the value. So I'd say biggest conflicts with product are more or less, not having it, or not having something completely focused on it.
Got it.
Just to give a sense of how closely we worked, I mean, Aaron and I actually had a weekly rhythm. We had a standing weekly meeting for an hour. So we met at least 1 hour every single week, but in reality, we probably also synced up multiple times throughout the week as well. But it was at least a weekly conversation, a full hour of, road mapping discussion. Mm-hmm. We worked very, very closely together, and that was very, very important.
Absolutely. All righty, guys. Well, thank you again for presenting today, and thank you for anyone who joined us. So a round of applause, cueing the applause in the background. So, and if anyone is joining us for the Startup Design Tracks Mixer, we're gonna see you in a minute in the next Zoom call.